Welcome, everybody, to the City of Farmers Branch special called council meeting for Tuesday, July 9th. Our first order of business this evening is item C1, resolution by the City Council of the City of Farmers Branch, Texas, authorizing publication of notice of intention to issue combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation, approving the preparation of a preliminary official statement and notice of sale, providing for other matters incidental thereto, and providing for an effective date.
Council and Mayor. Councilmember Jackson, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can. Okay, so tonight the resolution 2024-120, per local government code, we must publish the notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation. This notice must be once a week for 2 consecutive weeks, and it needs to state the time and place for the passage of the ordinance, in which you have on your desk a change to that notice. It went out with the 3rd of September. It's being changed to the 10th. It also needs to state the maximum amount to be issued, which we have as 10 million. It has the maximum maturity, which we list as 25 years because we have NTEC 2 on those COs. And it needs to state the purpose, in this case for public safety, for NTEC 2 and for our fire fleet. It also needs to put the manner in which this debt will be repaid, in which case it will be property tax. So these ordinances and notices are prepared by our bond counsel, and these bonds will allow the city to build our infrastructure for 911 and for our purchasing of vehicles and equipment for our fire department, all with the goal of providing health and safety to our residents while spreading the cost of the projects over time to ease the financial burden. Okay, so we're taking advantage of the tax exemptions that provide low-cost, long-term financial with our bond, AAA bond rating. And so what I wanted to show on this slide was our peer comparison of our debt rate, our INS debt rate with the other cities. We're at the top of the list with the lowest debt rating. So our INS, which is our interest and sinking, and our M&O rate, which is our maintenance and operations, those combined are our total tax rate. We're proposing in our fiscal year 25 budget a 3-cent tax rate reduction. This only comes from the M&O rate. And this new debt issuance will not change our debt rate of 0.048643. It will still hover around that amount. Did I need to put this on?
Can you make it full screen so folks at home can maybe?
Sure. I can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, right. I think it's the next one over. Yeah, perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
there we go. Okay, so with our AAA bond rating, as a borrowing entity, we will have a much lower interest rate when we go out to sell the bonds in September. In turn, it allows us to use our fund balance reserves to invest in high-yield interest rate investments. And we have our investment advisor from Hilltop Securities here with us tonight to answer any questions in regards to our future sale and our AAA bond rating, our fund balance reserves, any questions that you might have on this issuance. Is there any questions from council?
Council, any questions at this point?
Well, I did get a question from some residents that I told them I'd pass on to you, is why are we doing, issuing the bonds and not using the 3 cent reduction to pay for that?
So that's a good question. So again, the tax rate deduction is from the M&O side. And the INS portion, it's not capped by Senate Bill 2. So when we were looking at our debt strategy, with Senate Bill 2, there was a big push where we're capped at that 3.5%. So our fund balance reserves, we've tried to maintain close to a 90-day or the 20% high, that's financial policy. And we've had this kind of influx with our fire fleet where it was large dollar amounts going out the door, and we had to order far in advance. So it culminated with this $5 million large purchase. So in order to give a tax rate relief from the M&O rate, we could instead take it from property tax revenue, not decrease the rate, and then pay for the equipment that way. But there was an idea of maintaining the same INS low debt rate and being able to also give the property tax rate reduction. Because it's an overall tax rate reduction, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have
Oh, go
a
ahead.
question too. Thanks, Tammy, for the presentation. And I don't know if this question may be for you or the gentleman from Hilltop or both, but
Okay.
can you tell me, it's my understanding this is about a $10 million bond, is that correct? And
Correct.
according to this document that you just provided us, when it's fully paid, we will end up paying approximately 13 million with all the interest?
So you had the voter-approved general obligation bonds for $8 million that was passed in May.
Right?
And then you have the $5 million in our 911 dispatch center for Intech 2. And we're combining with that sale so that we can save on cost of issuance, the $5 million for the fire fleet.
Okay, and is there any impact at all by taking on this additional debt, any risk or adversity to our AAA bond rating?
So that's a great question, and I will bring up Eric to talk more about our AAA bond rating.
Well, good evening. Eric Maha with Hilltop. Good to be here tonight. But that is something I know we were talking earlier that we did want to highlight is being at that AAA level is something to be certainly proud of. These are independent rating agencies that do an independent review of the city, and maintaining that AAA helps in a few ways. One, it's certainly beneficial when we go to sell bonds, when we go to sell debt into the market. It's on lower the interest rate. And we were talking earlier, in today's market, it saves the city about 0.4 to 0.5% with that AAA bond rating. And so there are a number of different factors that feed into that bond rating. And really one of the key or main factors is liquidity, reserves, and that ties back to general fund balance. And so if the city were to utilize some of those existing reserves towards the project, that would put pressure on the bond rating. And I know you all have worked hard and should be proud of that AAA rating. And so that would put pressure on the bond rating. You know, in the state of Texas, the INS side, the INS tax rate is designed to fund payments. And the chart earlier I thought was very helpful. The city of Farmers Branch being at 4 to 5 cents on the debt side on INS compared to peers is very low. And so there's certainly capacity there on the INS side to support projects where you don't have to rely on fund balance. And really, you all have a healthy fund balance policy, keeping 3 months worth of expenses. That's prudent financial management. And that really helps in the future if things were to change, things out of the city's control. That's what that fund balance is there for. And so maintaining that's always important to us as financial advisor, is maintaining that AAA fund balance. And then you certainly have capacity on the INS side to support projects.
So taking on this potential debt, you believe has little or no effect on the risk of our bond rating?
No, sir.
Okay.
Drawing down the fund balance would, we feel, have more pressure on the bond rating.
Okay, and to that point, how much drawdown on that fund balance could we allow for without impacting that bond rating?
Yeah. City policy states 3 months. And so if the city were to draw down below that 3 months, then the rating agencies and even investors start to question, there's a policy in place, the city's not adhering to it. So it starts to raise more questions, I would say. You certainly want to try to maintain that policy level of 3 months.
And Tammy, can you tell me how much we have there? Do we have 3 months or more than 3 months, or
Thank you, Eric. Currently, we do.
how,
So
is it just
if
3
you
months? Is it
recall, at
6?
mid-year, we did use excess fund balance to purchase roof replacements for City
Right.
Hall and Senior Branch Connection. And then we also had the generator enclosure for the HVAC at the Branch Connection. We also purchased software. So that brought our fund balance down to the 90 days. We're right at the 90 days,
Okay, so our current balance is at the 90 days.
correct.
Okay.
So I think it's worth noting that we have had discussions about raising that 90-day balance level to 120 days, which provide a little more cushion to the city, especially in uncertain times. But I do have a question for Eric, please.
Yes, sir.
Pardon me. That is, cost of issuance. Can you give me a ballpark figure of what it costs to issue 11 million or 10,
Yes.
$11 million?
Currently, we have 10 million on the certificates and an estimated 3 million on the general obligation. And you're saving some economies by combining the two at the same time, which is good. You have rating fees. Anytime we issue debt in the state of Texas, you have the attorney general fee, financial advisor, bond counsel. For something like this, you're looking at about 150,000, I would say, cost of issuance. And that's something certainly between now and that September 10th date that, we'd sharpen our pencil on and finalize all those costs. That's a good estimate for now.
And would that be rolled into the principal itself?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir. It would not be an out-of-pocket cost to the city. It would be part of the financing.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
I do want to mention that we are just selling in the fall the 3 million of the general obligation bonds. We will sell next year the remaining portion of that 8 million. So we needed we need to sell for the branch connection as those bills are coming due right away.
Say that again and say it a little bit louder. I didn't catch all what you just said.
So in the fall, we are selling just the 3 million of the general obligation bonds. If you recall, the voter approved 8 million in total, and the other portion of those general obligation bonds will be sold next year.
Okay. And how soon after approval and issuance, and I don't know what that lead time or lag time is to get everything issued and sold, would we be able to utilize funds to make necessary purchases?
So that's why the second item on the agenda is a reimbursement resolution. That allows us to go ahead and we can upfront the cash for the branch connection and Intech 2, which we have a payment that's due in August. We will, once we get the sale of the bonds in September, finalized in, I think, October,
Deliver mid-October.
then we'll reimburse the city.
Okay. All right. Everybody good with that?
I just have one quick question.
Go ahead.
Where it says under possible council action under the legislative text, one of the motions says declaring the intent to reimburse certain prior capital costs. Can you explain what those prior capital costs would be? Is that things designated for the project or are those ancillary expenses?
Just things designated for the project. It's to reimburse. We have a payment that's due with Intech 2 in August. It will be to reimburse those prior capital cost.
Okay.
Richard have anything?
Richard, I'm sorry. You have any questions, comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy. So we're going to use the general fund balance to pay for some of the upfront costs while we wait for the bonds to be issued mid-October, correct? So does that mean for a period of time, our 90-day fund balance is going to be 45 days or 60 days?
So we have investments right now that we'll utilize. Again, I might mention that part of our reserves is it's always working for us. We're investing that in high-yield interest-saving investments. So interest income is a big component of our budget in the next year. But we will use some of our investments of that fund balance to upfront the cash on these projects and then get reimbursed.
Okay. That's all the questions I have, Mayor.
All righty. Any other questions, comments?
I do.
Go ahead.
Tammy, could you give me an idea of an approximation of how much our unencumbered general fund balance is today or this week?
$20,284,000
Around
and
20,
change.
around 20 million or so.
Correct.
And is it my understanding that that accounts for 3 months' worth of city?
Of your operating expenditures.
Operating
Correct.
expenses, okay. Have you or the city given consideration in utilizing any of those funds to purchase the fire equipment as opposed to general obligation bonds?
So we did do that with one previous fire truck when we had excess reserves. We're going into a future where we're having decrease of revenues. So some of our excess was related to sales tax revenue or interest income revenue. So we have done that in the past. It's the large dollar ticket amount that needs to be done all at once in order to get on the list for a truck that will be delivered 3 or 4 years out.
Okay, that's all.
Well, just to sort of follow up on that, I don't think it would make best sense for us to count on sales tax funds based on the discussions that we've had previously to go out and use some of that money, because if projections come in lower than expected, then that really puts us more into a bind than doing this
When will we know those projections, do you know?
October.
Our sales tax projections? Is that what we're asking? So we've already seen a significant decline. So we're 1.7 million
Behind.
reduced from where we were at last year. And I might mention that if we reduce our fund balance reserves, that's less interest income we'll be earning for the city to help pay for some of our expenses.
What about our property tax revenue? Is that expect to be higher or offsetting that sales
So we budgeted
tax?
with our property tax revenue to hold steady with last year's budget. Right now, and in our future slides where we talk about our property tax revenue, we're holding steady with no increase, not even using the 3.5%. We still have a large, significant amount of properties that are in dispute and appraisal review board status. So it can take up to 10 years for some of these cases to be resolved. We've seen where we've gotten bills from Dallas County they're clawing back some of the property tax revenue that we have received because there's settlements on those cases. So we're monitoring the situation, and I'll show you in an upcoming slide where we may not even reach our property tax revenue budget for this year because of the decline with the settlements.
Okay. And just to switch back to the certificates of obligations, do you have any idea or range of what interest rate we'd be paying on these? Particular range, given our excellent AAA bond ratings?
Yes, sir, and keep in mind, the actual rates would not be set until September.
Sure,
but
I'm just trying to get an idea for the residents and myself to have an idea generally how
We've
much.
assumed a 368 on the 3 million general obligation, and then for the certificates of obligation, the 5 million. And we're able to amortize the fleet separately from the other larger project, which is good. We're able to pay the fire equipment and the fleet off quicker.
Sure.
On that portion, about 4%, and then the other portion, about 4%. We have somewhat of an anomaly now in the market. If you follow the market, short-term rates are a little higher than long-term rates. So some of the short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. So we're about 4% for both.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm done.
You're welcome. Anything else? Richard, anything else?
No further questions, Mayor.
Okay, this item is marked for action, so I would entertain a motion. Or I'll be happy to make it myself. So,
Mayor, I'm happy to make the motion. I'll move to approve resolution number 2024-120, providing for notice to be given of intent to issue certificates of obligation, Series 2024, for the purpose of acquiring land and equipment, constructing a public safety dispatch center, purchasing public safety vehicles in an amount not to exceed 10 million, and declaring intent to reimburse certain prior capital costs as presented.
thank you, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. So if you would, please indicate your vote by raising your hand. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. Next up is item C2, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Farmers Branch, Texas, expressing intent to finance expenditures to be paid.
Thank you, Mayor. So as I mentioned, I don't have a presentation for this. This is, again, to reimburse the city for any upfront cost until we get the proceeds from the sale in the fall.
So this tags on to what we just discussed. Council, any questions in regards to this? Seeing none. Okay. This also is marked for action. Somebody like
Mayor,
to-
I'll move to approve resolution number 2024-119, expressing intent to finance expenditures to be paid as presented.
Second.
We have motion and second by Councilman Roman. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. Next up. Eric, thank you.
Mayor Lynn, before you go, we did skip the public comment.
I'm going to get into it first.
Okay.
Next up is item C3, discuss and review the city's financial status, revenues, expenditures, projects, financial trends, and other items related to the fiscal year 2024-25 budget. I do have a number of people who have spoken, or excuse me, who have signed up to speak to this issue. We're going to get into the discussion of this in the presentation first, and I know Councilman Jackson is sitting at the airport, so I want to give him the opportunity to weigh in first after Tammy goes through her presentation. And we'll have some general comments here. Then we will get into citizen comment portion related to that.
Okay, perfect. Council and Mayor, on June 27th, we had a council-requested budget exercise, a specially called meeting. And the exercise showcased what has already been cut from a proposed 3-cent property tax rate decrease, and what amenities, services, and positions would need to be removed for any additional tax rate decrease. In today's budget retreat, you'll see some of the same slides that we had on the June 27th meeting, and we're reconfirming our fiscal year 25 themes, highlights, and how we're going to communicate our budget to the public. Oh, that's not it. Hold on. Let me change that presentation. Hold on.
Thank you. You bet.
Okay, somebody messed with my slides a little bit. That's all right. Okay, so when we had our council requested exercise on the 27th, one apparent theme that was repeated is the continuing need to be open and transparent in our budgeting process. And the various city departments have brought before city council the larger components of the proposed budget and our previous study sessions. For instance, our assets, our revenues, our fees, our positions, our capital projects, our salaries and benefits, our medians, and our debt alignment. One unique tool that the city uses to continue with this open and transparent process, especially as we talk to our citizens, is our website. And on our website, we have a transparency tab. So I wanted to kind of showcase what this tool can provide as far as information. Let me go to it. Go to our website. So we have this, let me go to the homepage first. So if you go to our homepage at farmersbranchtx.gov, we have this transparency tab. And this transparency tab has received high recognition from the State Comptroller's Office, especially in regards to our budget and our debt. So we have about 10 years worth of budgets under this transparency website. We have about 7 years of our audited financial statements. And again, I'll mention kind of touting finance departments awards that they've received consecutively over numerous years for our certificate of achievement, for our audited financial statements, and this distinguished budget award for our budgets. We also have on here all of our tax information. We have our debt. We have check registers. And one in particular that I wanted to go into detail is this dashboard. So if you're ever curious to see how our revenue is doing in comparison to our budget, we have our revenue budget tab down here, which I'll click on and we can drill down further. We also have our operating budget, and then we have basically our checkbook with all of our vendor payments, where you can see who we've paid and what we've paid them for. So if I wanted to go into more detail, what is in our revenue budget in real time for our general fund, let's click on that. We want general revenues, and there's our property taxes. As you can see with this screen right here, we are close to a little bit over our budget for property taxes. Again, I'm going to mention that we've been receiving bills where we're needing to pay back some of those property taxes. So we're hoping to stay steady with what we budgeted as far as our revenue. Do I need to stay muted? Oh, unmute him. Okay. Hold on, Richard. Unmute. Okay. There we go. Okay. Okay, so that was just a little bit of an exercise. Again, you can drill down on most of these if you wanted to go and see the opposite side. Let's go and look at our expenditures. You can go into the general fund, go into your public safety division, and I want to look at the police department. So this is broken down further into our different divisions within police. We have patrol, investigation, communications. So you can see where we're collecting in real time what we've paid out as far as expenditures and what we've collected as far as revenues in comparison to our budgets. And that's just one mechanism in remaining open and transparent with all of our financial decisions. Okay, so back to our presentation. So I went over that. We'll have a slide further in this presentation where we'll go over the trash landfill fee, and that relates to our closure and post-closure. And we wanted to reconfirm some of the direction that we have from council. We had from the special session on June 27th, the council requested exercise that we wanted to bring forward Woven Health to present to the city council, and that will happen on July 16th. And then there was a request to look at the change of hours of operations for park facilities, and that we have a slide on as well. Budget timeline, you've probably seen this before, but what I really wanted to emphasize, and unfortunately, Mr. Jackson is blocking a little bit of the wording, but down below, you can see that we're 6 months into this budget process. So a lot of work has already been done to get us to this point. We've got 2 months left in which we have required meetings. We'll have our budget town hall. But what I really wanted to point out was the July 25th date. That's when we get our certification values from Dallas County Assessor's Office, our DCAP. So we are waiting for those numbers to be certified. We can give our best guess, and that's why we budgeted with no property tax rate revenue increase. In fact, we have sales tax revenue that's decreasing. So when we have an environment where our costs are increasing, our revenues are decreasing, it was very difficult to slim down and put out a financially prudent budget. But we've worked tirelessly, we've worked very hard to get this target level of service, remain good service levels. And when we get those certified values on July 25th, it will also tell us what we still have in litigation, and that's under settlement. So departments and budgets lean very hard into this year's budget and looking at their expenditures. Our expenditures are locked in. At this point, we are just waiting for those certifications to see if our revenue will be on target. And the budget planning process started back in February, where our council did a strategic planning session, and they came with their critical business outcomes, the goals that we have in setting our fiscal year 25 budget. These CBOs, critical business outcomes, they are to ensure the strategic alignment with our vision, and that is to have a future with a vibrant and diverse economy that supports beautiful parks, great amenities, and friendly neighborhoods. So also while maintaining our infrastructure, improving our assets, and we have diverse housing, accessible housing, and a diverse economy. So the departments use these goals in putting together their budgets and meeting the service expectations of our citizens. So today's budget retreat, we're going to go over the budget changes that we had from our special session on June 27th. We'll review our service levels again. We'll review any actions needed to be taken. And then we'll talk about our community outreach with our budget town hall scheduled for August 27th. And then we have our required budget public hearing and our required tax rate hearings that are going to be held in September. So the dollar bill was previously shown in last year's budget town hall, and it's a good representation of our economic makeup. So we are a little over a quarter of your property tax bill, 27%. 74% of Farmers Branch's tax bill is paid by our commercial parcels. And then 67% of residents do receive our 20% homestead exemption. 20% is the maximum you can receive on their homestead. And we have 29, close to a third of our residents that receive our senior and disabled exemption of $100,000. And we can talk a little bit later if we want to keep including this dollar bill representation. So this is showcasing the journey that our tax rate has been on, the previous history. As you can see, we have a trend in decreasing our property tax rate with last year's 2 cent and our proposed for this fiscal year of 3 cents. So previous councils have done some slight decreases back in 2018, 2019, and 2020 and 2021, but we have the larger increases with these past 2 years. These are substantial tax rate cuts. And I want to keep emphasizing this journey for this budget where we're offering tax relief with our rate decreases and our high exemptions. It's not been an easy task in maintaining the high service levels while we have decreasing revenues and increasing costs. And staff has worked very hard at trying to squeeze as much as they can. So this comparison with our peers, this is our Dallas cities, and we've also included other cities. If you were to take your house and move it to a different city, what would your property tax rate bill be? And if you can look at this, we're number 11. If we were to go to a 4 cent, we hope to maybe achieve that. But right now, with the proposed 3 cents, we're 13th on the list. If you look at the cities that are above us, they have different economic factors. You have Highland Park and University Park, where they have high property values. You also have Grapevine, Plano, and Frisco, that we're right there amongst them, where they have a sales tax as a large economic factor in their budgets. The other cities that are listed above us, Combine, Wilmer, they're smaller in population. But what I really wanted to focus on this comparative is when it comes to our seniors, we're at the top of the list. With our senior tax exemption, we're neck and neck with Grapevine. We're at the top. So this was the slide that was presented at our council-requested special meeting on June 27th. We talked about the journey in getting to a 3 cent proposed property tax rate cut. And we had cuts that we had already gone through with our departments and our staff and looking in ways to save taxpayer dollars. The result of that meeting is we had the number of events for the parks. Instead of decreasing from 8 events, it was reduced by 4 events. And we had reduced hours at the Recreation Center, Aquatic Center, and Branch Connection. So those are the savings. And the adjustment is around a $400,000 decrease, or it would be an increase in expenditures. Also, from the specially called meeting, we had outcomes where we discussed the Rose Garden that was taken off of the list for closing. We did talk about renegotiating our contract with the library with a potential savings of $100,000. We reduced our trails funding by $100,000. We reduced the Family Place and Woven Health Clinic, their support by $15,000 and $25,000 respectively. Removed the HR position with a $56,000 savings. We removed sponsorship at the community garden, and that is on private property. So it would be the staff time and supplies for that particular plot of garden. That would be a potential savings of our staff time at $33,000. Reduce the parks master plan of $400,000. And then there was a difference that was added. Instead of contracting out for our medians, we would actually hire parks maintenance staff for an increase of $64,000. And this goes into more detail about the events that were reduced with the Parks Department and the operating hours for the Aquatics Recreation Center and branch connection. And then I wanted to get clarification on the trash fee that was established with last city council and would come into effect on October 1st with $5 for our residents or $2.50 per month for our seniors. It would create revenue of $486,000 that would only go to our landfill closure post-closure. These are ongoing expenses with the eventual closure of the landfill. And we already have budgeted $2 million that will be transferred into the landfill closure fund. It gives us a good base of reserves for that future cost. So I wanted to get clarification that that trash fee will be going into effect on October 1st. And I'm going to bring up here just a second, Jeff, with our communications plan for the budget, and he'll talk more about the platforms, themes, and town hall.
Tammy, I'd like to just take a pause here for a moment and interrupt. Since Councilman Jackson is still with us and he does have to go to catch his plane, he does have a question that he would like to ask, and so I'd like to let him pose that at this time.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It got kind of late in our last meeting talking about the budget, and at the end of the budget, there was a desire to remove that HR position. It was an employee relations position, and wasn't very good technological last time, so I had a hard time trying to get in and ask questions, but I wanted to understand better the reasoning behind removing that HR position from the budget.
So we were given direction by, I believe, some of the council members, a majority, to remove the HR position. It was originally budgeted for $106,000. We had shown to have some savings with our training budgets, which really would only be a $56,000 cost savings.
Right,
Yoko,
and
would you?
that's what I'm asking for, is I'm asking for the rationale from my fellow council members on striking that from the budget, given that HR had funded half of that position. My understanding is it's an employee relations position, that's a risk management sort of protective position. So I'd like to hear from the council members more discussion and rationale behind why we're taking that out of the budget.
Okay. So I guess the question is being posed to those who voted against it. Councilman Roman, you want to start?
No.
You
No.
not going to answer his question?
No.
Okay. Councilman Baird?
Oh, sorry.
I would make other cuts in addition, so that was the one that we.
Can you speak a little closer to the microphone?
I would make other cuts in addition, but that was the one that we actually agreed on, a majority of us agreed on.
Were you the third, or
No.
you were the third? Okay.
And I don't really have anything to add, but just to Councilman Baird's point, one of the items that Ben had mentioned to me and other councilmen was to minimize our discussions regarding staffing and that sort of thing. So there's very little discussion in that area. I would agree with Mr. Baird that maybe some additional discussions in that area might be appropriate, but it's my understanding that's been taken off the table. So that's about all I can really add to this matter.
Well, nothing's off the table. That's why we're here. We
That
can
was not my understanding.
we can certainly discuss whatever we want to discuss, and if we want to bring it back, which I know Councilman Jackson would like to bring it back, so I'd like to invite our HR director to come up and just speak to the item again, and maybe communicate possibly some points that may have been missed, and impress on us what the necessity is for this position, why it's so needed.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank-
and Mayor, with that, and I'm sorry, Yoko, I have to run and change terminals. My plane has changed terminals, so now I'm going to be behind the gun to get to my plane. But just so that all that are watching know, I did have a follow-up discussion last week with Jeff from HR and got more insight regarding that particular position. And based on that input from Jeff, I'm supportive of bringing that back into the budget for next year. But I wanted my council partners to also hear some of those same insights so that we're all considering the same information. And with that, I've got to drop.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yoko Matsumoto, Director of Human Resources. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This position, so if you look at HR in general, we have multiple pillars that we juggle on a daily basis. And I want to make sure everybody understands, we don't work with one department. We support every single department within the organization, which is 500 employees. And one of those pieces that we do not have support for is employee relations. And when I look at employee relations, I see three main pillars. The first pillar would be any type of situation that might come up. It's like we spend time where either a manager, an employee can come to us and we consult. So there's that basic consultation where they come to us, discuss a situation, we work with them through that process. But it can move up as you do a consulting. It could go into maybe an oral or a written or, a termination. So it increases in difficulty. And all of that is tied into laws. And so this is a very intense part of one of the pillars that HR manages, because we need to make sure we are up to date on what court cases are there, or what are changes in the law, because if we make decisions on an employee relations matter, it could put us in court very quickly. Now, I would like to say we do work very closely. We are not attorneys. We work with our employment attorney who, when we have situations that we're working through, and I want to give you a good understanding of how much time this takes. When I come in, like I was at an EEOC training actually today. It's the first in-person EEOC training that has been offered in 4 years. And we had people from across the United States. We had people from New York that flew in for this one training. We had attorneys from DC to talk about what updates in the law were happening, what are trends in court cases, what type of law they're starting to have to argue in court. And then we also had representatives that are investigators for the EEOC within our Dallas hub to talk to us about these are the situations that they're starting to see. And so it educates us on, okay, these are trends that we're seeing. These are matters in which we need to make sure that we understand if there's this change when we're working with situations, we need to take those things into consideration. So that's one of the big pillars. I came back from that training, and I would say 10 minutes after, I was already talking about 2 different ER situations. And so it just happens like that. It takes a long time to listen, to understand. Now, those can be some simple ones, but if it gets into the realm of where we're having to investigate, that's a whole new component in which we have to put time towards. And it's not just like, okay, we work on it a day and it's done. It's continual. So this fiscal year alone, we've had between 25 and 30 ER-specific disciplines. That does not include consultations. That does not include mediations that we've done between employees. That does not include some of those other things that are more formal to where I'm doing a write-up or working with managers or employees. That's just in one fiscal year. That does not include items that were closed out that happened last fiscal year that are still bleeding into this fiscal year. The second pillar that I would say overlaps is our policy. Our personnel manual is pretty much the component that we as a city and our employees, we have to follow those guidelines. And so one of the first things I did coming in is I reviewed our personnel policy, had to make some updates to it, but that should be a continuous thing. We need to review our policies every so often so they're not outdated, because what we base these decisions on are based on what does our personnel manual say, and so we have to go through it. So if there's change in law, we need to make sure that it's changed in our policy. So this person would actually be monitoring our personnel manual, making sure that everything is up to date. And if we see trends, we need to make changes to those personnel policies. I would like to say the only person who has 100% control over the personnel policy manual is the city manager. Ben Williamson is the only person who can make those changes, but it's our team that needs to study it, to present it to the city manager and say, these are the changes we're recommending, and then he can amend those things for us. And then the last pillar is the training piece. The training piece is something that I think is overlooked many times, and that's actually what we heard of in our training today. Training seems to go by the wayside because you're spending so much time on the process. So what happens is we're working the process, you modify it, but we need to go out and train our managers. Now with our organization, we have a lot of movement. If you have an organization that has movement, that means people are moving up into new management positions. We have, people who are still trying to learn policy, who are still trying to learn law. So that's where we come in and we help guide situations to ensure that we do not get an EEOC claim or a lawsuit that is we term somebody when we shouldn't have, or there was discrimination within a practice that we have. So these are very specific areas of expertise. And I believe I heard last time that somebody said, why don't we just push it out to different people within HR? The most important part of this piece is confidentiality. It is very, very important that the discussions that I have don't get out to other employees. And I cannot run an HR department knowing that people are coming to us telling us this information and then everybody's talking about it. So we have to ensure that we have somebody who is very focused on this pillar in HR and ensure that the employees can trust us enough to come to us with matters that are important to them, knowing that it's not going to get out and be talked about amongst the workforce. So that is one of the reasons why I do not push these matters out to my payroll person or to my benefits person or to my onboarding person, because they are not in a need-to-know situation, and I have to make sure that our employees can trust us enough to come to us with these matters to ensure that we manage it along with our attorneys in a confidential manner. So that was one thing that I heard the last meeting. My apologies, I was not here, but I did watch it online, and that is the reason why we do not just push these matters out. So I don't know if that kind of gave you a good understanding. I think of it like if you think of the Olympic rings, they kind of overlap. So that's what this position, it's like the ER overlaps with the policy, which overlaps with the training, which also overlaps with like FMLA and ADA. All these things overlap, and I need somebody to be able to maneuver the intricate expertise of this field.
Yoko, without getting into any specifics, I'd like to ask a question, and that is, would it be safe to assume that when an issue arises, potential liability of a payout in some form or fashion by the city to a particular employee could exceed $56,000?
Yes. I mean, yes.
Okay.
For example, in this training today, they were talking about a payout of a $2 million payout on a discrimination
Understood. We don't need to go any
case.
further.
That was like not us. That's not us. Let me clarify that. These are the things that they put out to say, this is what's happening. This is a court case that happened. This is another one that happened. So Yeah, it can vary, but yes.
Okay. And I think that was one of the points that Councilman Jackson, and I will attempt to speak for him, was trying to bring up, and why he was so adamant about including this position in the budget, because of the potential liability far outweighs the short-term cost of adding this position. And that liability could span over several years in just one instance alone. So I know that is what he was hoping to get council or his fellow council members to reconsider.
Yes.
Questions, comments?
Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I think to just follow up to the mayor's question about there being a possibility that there could be some liability that arises where there's a recovery from the person who's alleging something against the city, right? But there's an equal possibility that exists that there wouldn't be any liability that would result even if someone brought a claim.
Sure. I mean, that
Because
happens.
we're just talking about possibilities.
Absolutely. There's situations where and somebody can go to the EOC with a claim. EOC looks into it and says we don't find anything, but then they'll give them here's your right to sue letter, which means we didn't find anything, but I'm giving you this letter so you can go sue, and then that employee can go on their behalf, find their own attorney and sue. So we might have to work with our attorneys to manage those type of things as well. So yes, it's both ends. I would agree.
So if we were to move forward with this position, does that mean that you're going to eliminate your need for working with our attorneys?
No, you always the ER specialist. Their best friend is your employment law attorney. You always have to have your attorney and you have your ER specialist. They go hand in hand. We are not attorneys, but we have attorneys to work there. What we do is we work with our employees who come in to our offices, and we have to walk them through that process to ensure that, okay, do we have the documentation we need? Do we have, A, B, and C? Did we do a progressive discipline? Are we making sure that the reason we're terming this person is legit and it's not going to get us into trouble? And what we do is we call our attorney and say, okay, this is kind of what we have going on, and you good on that side, you good on this side, and we work together. So no, it will not.
Okay. I have a question for you. I believe at your law firm, there's somebody with an expertise in specifically employment-related matters. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And they're an equity partner,
Yes.
and they have worked with us before in related type issues?
Yes.
Okay. And then my next question is, let's see. Well, that was it, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, hypothetical, if we have someone, even if it doesn't go to court or doesn't go, there's still potential costs that we as a city could incur because of a poor management decision, some other relationship issue. Can you give some examples of what those could be and what the potential exposure is?
So a key thing, and let me know if I'm not answering your question, but the first thing that comes to my mind is since we work with all departments, it's not just one. So departments will come to us and say, this is what's happening and this is what I want to do. And so let's walk through this process, let's see what you have. And then they're like, okay, this is the discipline I want. Or, I want to go for a suspension. And so since we have that broader view, it's important for us to make sure we're looking at, well, this kind of thing happened in this department, and we want to make sure we're consistent, because consistency is key. So we help guide and say, if you do that over here, we didn't do the same thing, and it's with the protected class. So that could be some sort of issue for us. So we just kind of guide them to because we're seeing the broader organization where they're seeing just their work group. And so we're trying to maintain the consistency. So yes, you could do that suspension, but this, there was another person that did the same thing and they just got it written. And so you're starting to see inconsistencies, and then those are the type of things that we, or HR specialists, would help mitigate the risk of possibly, oh, well, why did that person just get a slap on the wrist and I'm getting a suspension and I'm not getting paid for 3 days? So that's one of the assets of having that person to look broadly. Of course, we're not going to say, well, in this department, this is what happened, but we're guiding that whole process with being confidential with the matters. And then most of the time, we reach out to the attorneys when it's just like one of those, oh, I need to talk to you about this one. Most of the time, we're handling these things on our own, and our attorneys really come in on some bigger matters that I'm just like, let me run this by you and see what you're saying. And what is great about working with our attorneys, they see law cases going across cities as well. And in like the circuit courts, those are really important. That's where they give us perspective, because they are that piece to say, well, in this circuit court, we're seeing this, but in the Fifth Circuit, which is our circuit, this is kind of the trend going on. So that helps us navigate what we're doing on our end. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that was the first response that came to my mind, is how we help mitigate some of those things that might not cost us.
A bit. I was just thinking, what potential issues this position could diffuse prior to having to get into a litigious situation.
Yeah, number one, somebody trying to fire somebody and they don't need to. We're at an at-will state, we're gonna fire them, I don't need to have any documentation. That's the first thing. We're like, no, yes, we are at will, but let's walk this back and let's look to see and walk them through the process. I would say in terms of our organization, there is a lot of movement. And I believe I mentioned this prior to when you were on the board. We're seeing a lot of young or new people in supervisory roles. And so not having that knowledge, that's where this person is going to help mitigate a lot of things. Because again, they hear, we're at will, I'm just going to fire them. We don't need to have any reason. Or yes, that is true. But we need to make sure we look into the reasons as to why we're doing this and make sure we're doing it on an even playing field. And so I think having new managers, that's one of the pieces that I do work with a lot, is just people who are like, I'm not really sure what to do with this. And they will come into my office just like I'm working on something. Hey, I need to talk to you. Come on in. I will never keep that door shut. The door is open all the time. But it's like sitting there and saying they're walking through the process. And sometimes it can be intertwined with something so complicated like ADA, like an accommodation for a disability, or it could be intertwined with FMLA. These are very complex aspects of our job. And so sometimes it's just like, okay, let me hear what you're saying. Let me walk through the process. And most of the time, we try to take the burden off the supervisor. We take the expertise piece and we're walking them through that process. So that's an example of somebody just coming in and saying, I'm going to fire this person because we're at will. And I'm like, okay, let's walk that back. Let's look at, was there a progressive discipline? Did we start with, does the employee know that they're doing wrong? Did we do a performance expectation memo? If not, let's start with that. And then we can, work through that process. And that comes in quite a bit. We get those quite a bit. Those are easy ones that person would be able to walk through. It's when it's more complex, where an employee hires an attorney on an appeal, and you're like, okay, let's see if this is going to be something that might be going to court. So that's when we pull our attorneys in.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have a question, sort of tag along on that. And that would be like, let's talk about PD for a second.
Okay.
And something happens at PD. Could be a OIS or some other incident, and IA does their job and clears an officer of any fault or wrongdoing. Mm-hmm. But yet, let's say somebody from the public isn't satisfied with that and seeks to file suit against the city and or particular officer. Mm-hmm. Would that specialist get involved and work with chief, city manager, city attorney, and the officer to help protect in that instance?
Right. So this is a weird answer, but I use this quite a bit. It's like, how long is a string? A string could be this long, a string could be that long, a string could be that long. So what that means to me is, it depends on the situation. And yes, I'm not an attorney, and I know attorneys use that. It depends, but it does depend. If it's, and let me start by saying both chiefs, fire and police chiefs, we are like when we're working with situations in police and fire, it's a little different because police and fire, there's also some special law that we need to know in managing situations with police and fire that it's going to be different than working with regular employees. So per statute, there's some specific things we have to do in terms of that. So currently, anything with police and fire comes to me. So I'm very well connected with Chief Latimer, Chief McCoy. Anytime there's something that has to do with an ER matter, they connect with us right away, and we walk through that process. And most of the time, I'm connecting with the employment and law attorney with police and fire. And so if it gets to, if the string gets longer and it's more intense and more complicated, yes, we definitely bring in the attorneys. They will be working with us. This employee specialist will be one of the HR representative. And then you have police and fire. And of course, we always want to keep the city manager in loop of those matters. So to me, police and fire is very specific because there are some certain nuances in working those type of disciplines that are required by law.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Council, any other questions?
I had a few questions.
Yeah.
You made a comment, there's been a lot of movement in HR. Can you help me understand what that means?
So let me clarify. There's movement within our organization, not necessarily in HR, but just in general, we're getting new managers are being promoted, which is a wonderful thing. I am fairly new. I've been with the city about a year and a few months now. The deputy director, Jeffrey Ross, who presented, he has also been with the city about a year. So we're one of the newer people. But within my team, we've had promotions but the people aren't new. So within HR, we've been pretty solid about a year. And so in that first year was really just understanding the city, understanding the culture, and really understanding kind of what are the processes. So some of the HR matters that we did our first year was we had to really get into our personnel manual, update it, add some new meat in there. We needed to get our forms, like discipline forms, unified because we wanted to ensure that one department wasn't issuing a certain type of discipline on one form where the other department was doing it differently. Like we needed to have consistency. So we built that up as well. And then we started working on a little bit of training here and there. But I think that's the piece that I really want to kind of get going is getting some of these newer managers into trainings because I remember my very first discipline. And I was in the libraries. I was a director of libraries. And the thing I knew about HR was to call HR to be like, I need your help. The very first serious matter I had, I was so nervous. I had no clue. And having HR there to guide me through that process was just like, oh my gosh, I could focus on what my job was, which was running a library. But it just gave this sense of relief to say HR can come in and they guide me, and they brought the attorneys. Like the attorneys came with me. And so knowing that on the other side, not being an HR profession since I was a little girl, knowing how I felt when I was on the other side of the table, being, I don't know what to do, and I'm not sure, and I'm scared, and I don't want to have this discussion. That's the mindset I have in working with our people now. Like, when our departments come to us, I understand how it can be a little nerve-wracking because they don't know the laws, they don't know the nuances. It's a scary world. And so that's how we want to work with our teams to be like, you know what? I got you on this side, but just give me, what do you have here? And what type of trainings are you needing? Like, do we need to give a training on how to document behaviors? Yes, we definitely do, because if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So little things like that are many trainings that I want to kind of build so our new managers within our organization have, I guess, the comfort and the baseline knowledge to know when they need to come to HR, and then we'll help them from there.
And my next question, I'm not sure if it's for you, Ben, or for her, but when was the last time the policies were reviewed, and what's the frequency of those reviews?
It's a great question. We just updated and reviewed the policy. So with the new HR team coming on and the new city manager coming on, that was one of the first things we did is we wanted to standardize our policies across the board. We found that there were opportunities for consistency, and we wanted to create some certain functions within the policy manual that made it resilient. So one of the most basic ones is if you looked at the personnel manual in the past, you had no idea what revisions were done. So now it's got a page that shows when it was last updated and what the changes were. So staff can go back in time and look at references to those and figure out what was changed, because what if they don't know or they didn't get the update or the emails, but that was just done. And that's something we consistently look at to make sure as changes are needed, we have a list of things we're going to incorporate, and then we bring those forward as we work together. But there's not an established every 5-year cadence. It's as needed when we have enough changes to substantiate a change in the personnel manual for the employees. But it was just done.
Yeah, it was February of,
This year.
24 is when, and it's a volume 20 of our personnel manual. And just like city manager did mention, we do have a running list of things. Like departments will come to us and say, hey, you know, can we clarify this? Like I have one from Mark. He was great. He came and told me, hey, this is not very clear. Have it on a note. So the next time we do a revision, that's going to be updated to where it's clear so we don't have any miscommunication amongst our staff. So we do have a running list. And I would say, I mean, because it takes a lot of time from the city manager to review a policy, or at least this one did, because we did have revisions. And I think that was a wonderful suggestion. We had the running to show this is what the old one was, this is what the new one was. So the employees were able to kind of go through it. And I would like to say on that revision, I was expecting to get calls out left and right, left and right, left and right. We had 0 calls on that because I think it was so transparent on the changes. But not to say that there's not changes that we need to make continuously. And so we have that running list. So I would say about every 2 years is a good time.
Last question. About how many EEOC claims or cases, I'm not sure what the right terminology is there, have we had here throughout the city in the past, say, 4 or 5 years?
I don't know the 4 or 5 years. I know we're working on one now from my tenure here. I don't know the past, though. I couldn't give you that number on the past.
Okay, thanks.
Not too frequently. It's usually the appeals to disciplinary action and or up to terminations that are more frequent. But an appeal with the EOC, I think we've had one that's been going prior to your tenure here with the organization. They just take time because they go through multiple layers and lots of meetings to prepare for them.
Yeah, and you could have EOC, but you could have TWC hearings, like when, you know, they're looking for unemployment, and then we're having to do that. That person would also work with TWC to get on those hearings and kind of go through that process and keep it documented, because once it goes to TWC, sometimes they'll jump to the EOC, and once they do that, then they'll jump to a lawsuit. So you're kind of managing 3 things at once. But again, our attorneys are with us on that as well.
You did mention that you said the average was between 25 and 30 actions a year.
Yeah, I mean, fiscal year's not even over, and yeah, so that's, I keep a spreadsheet to see, because I like to see what trends we are. Like if I'm doing actions, is it an action based on time and attendance? Or, you know, I want to see the trends and what our managers are having to deal with. So then that would key in to be like, oh, well, we see there's a lot of issues on time and attendance or I don't know, whatever it is, that theme. So what we'll do is I want this person to create trainings based on what we see as the high themes to get people in, to train them on it, and then go from there. But since I started that this fiscal year, there's been between 25 and 30, but that does not include just the consultations that we have, mediations that we do. A mediation can take me about an hour and a half. And one day, like, I had 3 back-to-back mediations. That's my whole day. That's between employees. So that is not included in that spreadsheet.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one quick, so based on that example you just gave, this person would be in a position to notice those trends and be able to react to them and proactively provide the training required to hopefully eliminate or mitigate whatever those actions are. Part of that could be helpful in employee retention, and which is, we know, is a high cost, as well as potentially getting rid of someone, if we want to say quicker, before, once we notice that an issue is there, instead of allowing it to continue on unchecked.
That's correct. The expectation for this position would be to be well-versed in basic HR laws, to understand our policies, and to mitigate those risks of just, it's just continuous loop.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Anything else?
And I
Thank you,
would like to
Yoko.
say we did remove part of that, because you said we were paying for it. They took, what was removed from our budget was training budget to go towards this position. So I said, I have money, let's use the money. It can get me a person. So we were like, let's just do it.
Thank you.
And
Well,
thank you.
I think as we move forward, that will be something the council needs to discuss. Councilman Jackson, we want to bring that up, and we'll probably continue that discussion on the 16th, I would imagine. Tammy, I'll return the floor to you, and then I want to get to our guests that are in the audience this evening.
So we're at the part where our communications director, Jeff Brady, would come up and talk about our future budget town hall and how we communicate this budget.
Okay. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Tammy. Nice summary. So we've been talking about HR, Mayor, Council, Jeff Brady, Director of Communications. So we've been talking about HR specifically, and now we're going to kind of back up and take more of a macro look at the overall budget and how we communicate that. So just briefly, we have one slide here, but there's three broad topics. So we want to talk about the platforms and specifically what we used last year to communicate the budget, and whether we want to replicate that or do something a little bit different or supplement it. And then secondly, themes. What would be the overall messaging? What are the key points that we want to use to drive home the elements, the basic elements, the most important elements of this budget? And then lastly, the town hall. We do have, as Tammy mentioned, we do have a town hall scheduled late in August. And so we've done that before. Do we want to use the same format for that town hall, or modify that to a different process? So first of all, the platforms, we've got them listed here, but we had the video last year. And the main question there regarding the video is, do we want to do that the same way? So as some of you may remember, the council themselves were the key spokespeople speaking in the video. We developed the script, but then we allocated different portions of it to the council members, and they're the ones who actually narrated or presented the topics of the budget video. So do we want to replicate that and do it the same way, or maybe use a different approach? Just for your information, the cost of that video was $4,950, complete, totally shot and edited for us. It was uploaded in August. We had 324 views on our YouTube channel. And then there was a subsequent smaller piece that was kind of a tease video that was uploaded later for about 32 views. So overall, we had a total of about 356 views of the video on our YouTube channel. So we'd like some direction on that, because we do need to begin that process of shooting and editing that video soon in order to have it ready on a timely basis. And then you may remember, we also had a trifold, a very helpful and detailed trifold that we used last year to explain the budget. Had some of the graphics that Tammy has already talked about in this video. So I think that was distributed at the town hall, and we also had it available here at City Hall. So is this a useful tool? Is this what we would, let me see here. Thank you. Just close that out.
You can end that.
Yeah, I don't think we need that anymore. Thank you. So is the trifold helpful? Is that useful, or do we want to go in a different direction there? We have e-newsletters, which we use frequently, and we have a relatively high open rate of about 39% overall on the e-newsletters or emails that we send out. The industry average is about 9%, believe it or not. So our success with emails is actually pretty good. We can develop infographics, and we've done that before. Tammy mentioned the dollar bill, the breakdown of the dollar bill in terms of how much of the average dollar the taxpayer pays goes to the city versus the other taxing entities. And we have other types of info. The list is almost infinite in terms of how you can create an infographic to explain the details of the budget to the public. And social media. We use social media quite a bit as well to take snippets or maybe small portions of the budget and share those on a sequential basis. We can develop a plan, a calendar for that as well. So what we'd like to get from the council, mayor, council, tonight or very soon, is if these are sufficient or if we want to expand or maybe eliminate some of these and do something else, or if this is a suitable template of platforms to use for explaining the budget to the public. It's always the same old question, do we want to be clear and complete and accurate and transparent as possible, but at the same time, we want to be frugal and conscientious about how we're spending taxpayer dollars and not create a tremendous amount of content that the public never finds useful and will never consume. And so that's the question at the end of the day. So we'd like some feedback on that, either now or in the very near future. And then secondly, the themes. Of all the things we've discussed, and Tammy has done a great job of presenting kind of an overall picture of the budget that we have right now, what are the key themes that the council would like us to emphasize as we're messaging the budget to the public? And we have some ideas here. Our comps to other cities, where Farmers Branch sits in a comparison to our neighboring cities, how that adds up. At least a 3-cent reduction. That might be something that we'd like to emphasize to the public. The dollar chart is very popular. The breakdown of how your average dollar spent breaks down, or pie charts. People love pie charts, so we could use the penny or a circular pie chart and break out different components of the budget that way. And it's worth noting also that I've reached out to some of our neighboring cities and my colleagues in communications to find out what worked for them and what seemed to be an effective strategy for our neighboring cities. So I've got some ideas that I can share with you in terms of infographics, or there's a living, breathing FAQ sheet that's maybe updated every week so the public can submit questions and we can get them answered by finance and then post those on an ongoing basis so the public has an opportunity to ask questions by email and we answer those on a progressive basis. So there's a lot of good ideas, but again, how much is enough? And so lastly, the town hall. We've got that scheduled at venue 1842 this year, so it's a nice new surrounding. Last year, you may remember, we showed the budget video, and then we had some of the key messaging pieces on foam boards, on easels, around the perimeter of the room. There was a Q&A with the main body, the main group, and then we invited the crowd, the community gathered there at the meeting to break up and go to each of the subjects that were represented by the foam boards. And there was a subject matter expert, a council member, or perhaps a department head who could answer those specific questions at each of the easels. So that was the format of our town hall last year. So that also, we'd like some feedback from the council, Mayor, if that is a good format, if that seemed to work well, or if we need to change the format of the town hall somewhat as we're planning it this year.
Thank you, Jeff. So, council, I know some of you may just be seeing this or hearing it for the first time. I don't know if you have any early thoughts on any of these items that you'd like to share.7anybody?
Yeah, I like the workshop style. I think it's more interactive and gives us an opportunity to not only just demonstrate the knowledge and showcase it to our residents, but also interact with them and answer, questions about whatever subject we're intended to discuss, but also any other questions. I think some residents might feel more comfortable approaching other council members, so I think it opens a door for all of us to interact in an equal way. So I want to make sure we do that. And I think venue 1842 would be a great place since it's a brand-new location.
Sure.
Thank you.
As far as the video, it just seems, basically $5,000 to spend on something that was only utilized by 300. And we don't know how many of those were multiple looks.
True.
If it was me, I would have looked at myself doing it like 4 or 5 times.
And let me that's absolutely true. And to add also, it's hard to quantify the value because the people who were very interested, that may have been very important to them. So it's hard to quantify in this arena where we have Taylor Swift videos that get millions of views and you see something that only got 300, it's hard to assess that. But, for citizens who may be homebound or who are not able to come here or who are very interested on a piece of the budget, it is useful to them. But still,
Yeah,
it's a limited number of views.
Exactly. Limited views for that expense,
sir.
and we're talking about cutting expenses here. So it's just, that's my thoughts on that one.
Sure.
That it?
Oh, but the other thing, I love the idea of the growing FAQ list. That's something we could put on the website. Anyone could address, and it's going to hit specific questions. Love the dollar. Love the idea of the 3-cent reduction. If we could, I had a thought on that. Get back to me.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would cut the video also. Almost $14 per view. It's too much. I would try to streamline and do a couple of 3 fewer things than we did last year. Social media, e-news, email, e-newsletter and email are good. Not sure about the handout, the trifold handout. Information on the website that's easy to get to would be my preference there. And if we're going to do an infographic, I'm a maybe on that, I guess. Into the themes. Yeah, what you did last year, we can just sub in the new numbers, I would suppose, graphically, and reuse last year's with this year's numbers. I would echo what Omar said about the venue and the format there. Yeah, I think that's it.
Jeff, how many of the brochures, the trifold, did we end up handing out?
We printed 150, and I think that was about the right number. If we had had more town halls or more events, we probably would have needed more, but that was about right. It was 150. Full color, so they are expensive, but useful.
Councilman Neal, anything?
I would concur. The cost of the video seemed quite high at $5,000. I think that's a little extensive. But to that, what's the total costs of all these other items combined?
Well, of course, the
Overall.
social media is free. The infographics are relatively inexpensive. We have a contractor who does these for, you could create an infographic. He charges by the hour, so it would be a couple $100 per infographic. And I have some examples of what other cities have done, if you'd like to consider those. I'm not sure about the brochure, but we can get that number for you, but it's full color brochure. 150 copies is not that many. Wouldn't be as much as the video, for sure.
Okay, yeah,
Okay,
that seems fine to me.
thank you. So, Jeff, I'd like to just sort of weigh in on this because for me, I'd rather over-communicate than under-communicate. I'd rather have more town hall meetings to make sure our residents have adequate opportunity to ask questions and become informed of our budget and be a part of the budget process. When we're looking at all of this in total, it's hard for me to sit here and say that a video costs too much. I don't know, the $5,000, $4,950 is not out of line based on my knowledge because I do that sort of stuff as for a business. But at $14 a view, that's a little high. So to me, that may not be the best spend of money. But certainly almost everything else on this list makes perfect sense. But I do want to make a couple of specific comments. Pie charts or bar charts or whatever, absolutely. Whatever we can put into some type of graphical form that helps the user understand what it is that they're looking at is a good thing. And people are more attracted to the graphics than they are to the text necessarily. They'll find the text if they need more backup. But having that graphic in that brochure, that was a very good handout that was put together last year, included a lot of information. So I would like to see us do something like that again. Town hall meetings, if we're going to use venue 1842, we've got to make a huge improvement there. I went to an event, the last senior dance that was there. The acoustics in that place are awful because it's all concrete and brick. There's nothing to absorb the sound. If we're going to have a town hall meeting there, we need to open the side doors to at least let some sound vent out so it's not bouncing around on the inside, and make it a better experience for those who are coming there. That was one of the advantages of the Branch Connection, because they had a really good room for doing that. But having stations, having all the council on site where residents can ask questions and get a direct response individually or as a group, that's a huge thing. That's what we're here for. And everyone on council should know 10 times more about this budget than any resident, and we should be prepared to answer all their questions. So let's get it done.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I just want to add one thing to the town hall meetings. I'm a big advocate for those. The more the better. I just want us to be conscious of the time that we have those, because many residents work 8 to 4, 9 to 5 kind of thing. So just want to be mindful of that. So it gives a better opportunity for the residents to.
And what will be the parking situation if we do it at the venue? And if you're going
The
to do
same
it,
as any other large event, I suppose. So
are
that's
they parking down the street and walking down the street?
until we reconfigure Ford Road, that's
We
about the only alternative that we have.
should probably have it at the rec center then. I would vote for the rec center then.
Rec center or Branch Connection won't be done in time, but
Well, I was just going to say the parking, I think we have 40, 50, 60 spots currently that you have to walk down the brick pathway to. So we do have we have handicap parking adjacent to the center. We can look at some other alternatives, possibly maybe some on-street parking on Ford Road or something like that. But we can look at some alternatives if we need to for that.
So what I'm hearing is we'll lean away from the video, maybe not do the video this year, but lean more heavily into infographics. And I've got some good examples, if any of you would like to see them during a break from other cities, what other cities have done that I think might work for us. So you could take a look at those and circle the ones you like, if so, and keep the town hall pretty much as it has been, but certainly pay attention to the acoustics at venue 1842. So we'll look at that. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
thank you, Jeff.
So council, we've reached the end of the presentation, but we do need some clarification on any items that we previously discussed, the HR position, the trash fee, and going forward, because we will be presenting this budget on July 31st. So it's just right around the corner.
So I would like to see the HR position included in the budget. And I know we have other things to discuss, but we also have a number of residents who are here that would like to provide their comments as to one of the specific budget items. So if it's okay with the council, I would like to allow residents to speak at this time. You good with that? Thank you. So this will be our public comment period. I'll remind you that there's a 3-minute time limit for each citizen to speak. Please come up to the podium in the front. When your name is called, state your name and address. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Please, no disparaging or inflammatory remarks directed at any member of the city council or city staff. And if need be, please do not be repetitive. I know a number of people, I think everybody has signed up to speak to one specific item. So if your points have been covered by somebody else, please be cognizant of that. Do you have a wait of time? Very good. Our first speaker will be Mary Beth Dimian. That's just the way they were handed to me.
Okay.
So, no, come up to the front.
No.
Yep.
You got it. You got it.
So we got everybody up to the podium.
Oh, no.
We're all friends. Please state your name and address.
My name is Mary Beth Demijian. I live at 3277 Brincrest Drive, here in Farmers Branch, of course. A lot of us are very concerned, as you can see, about the status of the community garden. And we've heard so many different stories, different replies from different council members, and all these things. We're just all very anxious about what's going to happen with it. So we really want the garden to stay. We've been there a very long time. It does a lot of good things for us, good things for the city. And where are we now? We've had a communication problem for sure. And maybe we need somebody from the, another thing I noticed, on the $33,000, there was an asterisk by it. Can somebody explain what that asterisk was all about? Anything?
Y'all put something over what the asterisk explanation
Hold on,
is.
hold on.
No, I just wondered, and why the asterisk was there? What does it refer to?
Give me to get to that slide. Let me see if I can
Okay.
come back to it. See if I can find it. There we go. Okay. I'm Robert Diaz, Parks and Rec Director. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So the asterisk here indicates includes staff time that will be absorbed in other city parks and maintenance. So what we're looking at is if we remove the garden, we're going to reallocate those the people that work on that to other items in the city. So that's what the asterisk is for. So basically, the time that we would spend at the garden, we would be spending on other projects, other parts of the city. So that's kind of what that speaks to that.
That's probably pretty much been done already, right? Because we're not seeing a whole lot of city staff at the garden anymore.
Well,
Rob, can y'all make sure y'all are using the microphone, please? Sorry, there's folks that
Sorry.
can't hear y'all. Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, I said we're not seeing much staff at the garden anymore, so I assume that's been taken care of.
Well, I mean, I could,
Well, they come, they pick up the trash, I know that,
correct.
and they drop the mulch.
Talking to Mike.
And they drop the mulch. And what else? That's it.
Well, I know we maintain the irrigation systems. We do some of the maintenance in and around the beds and things like that. I know the other day, Ben Solis, one of our supervisors, he goes out once a month and does a Saturday work day.
Right.
So those are the kind of things that we would cut back on if this is something that council would want to approve. But that's why we're talking about it this evening.
But it's not remove the garden, it's just remove the sponsorship.
Correct, and let me clarify that, and I've actually had I talked to some members of Park Board. This is just the beginnings of the conversation. What I would like to see is if this is something council wants to do, we would transition somehow. I don't see October 1st, it's a switch, and all of a sudden we just stop going. We would have to have some kind of transition plan and work through with those that are volunteers on how we would transition, where city would take a step back and would transition it back to the volunteers and the church, because it is
Right.
it's on the church property.
Can we be made aware of these discussions and transitions and what you all are thinking about?
Yes.
Okay, good. Through how? How would we get that information? Through Ben?
Well, as we move through the process, if this is something that we are going to transition to, we'll make the public aware of that transition process.
Okay, that's good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I was going to suggest that maybe there's maybe a further explanation that might be needed to answer questions from the residents. I had some questions on my own, and maybe other council members did, just to make sure that if there are questions that are had, that we can move through the citizen comment process as efficiently as possible if some of them are answered through our questions. And if we miss any, then that would be a good opportunity to hear from the residents.
Sure, that's fine. You have questions?
Yeah, so.
Hear from the residents
Oh.
first.
Hold on. Please, let me let the council, this is council's meeting first. So let me let them answer. They might end up answering your question.
Okay, so Robert, I have some questions for you. So.
Yes, sir.
Can you break down that $33,000 cost? You mentioned part of it was for staffing. You mentioned mulch and some other things. Do you have that breakdown of how that exactly breaks down? There you go. See?
Sure. The 33,000 is, we broke it down. Basically, we use a work order system to kind of calculate some of our, and I think we actually talked about this at one of our last meetings. But when we look at supplies for what we utilize at the garden, of the 33,000, it's about 17,000 for supplies. And when we quantify our labor, it's about 16,000 for just this is annual maintenance. So that gets us close to that 33,000.
Okay, and what types of supplies is it that you're purchasing?
Irrigation supplies, any kind of fertilizers, when we have to do any kind of work in maintenance in the garden itself. Trying to think. Mark, what other supplies do we have? I'll get Mark Moffett, our park superintendent, to answer any of those questions.
It's organic fertilizers is.
Mark, would you please come up to the microphone at the front, please? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everybody. It is the enriched topsoils, bed prep mix. It is the mulch. It is water. It is the seeds and all materials that go into it.
Okay. And then when we're talking about removing the sponsorship, we're not the owners of that property. It's my understanding.
Correct.
Who owns it?
Church, it's church-owned property, and I don't remember, do you remember the name of the church?
It's the Methodist Church.
Chapel Hill Methodist, okay.
Okay. Do we know how we ended up taking the responsibility of maintaining this property that's considered private property?
I know it was years ago, previous director wanted to work with the community to do this garden, and I think there were some members, and there was an opportunity, I guess, to be able to have the garden on this property, and there was an agreement. Currently, there's an agreement with the church to be able to have the garden, and as part of that agreement was the city would maintain certain portions and do up to certain level of maintenance. Volunteers would do the rest. Currently, there is a fee that someone has to pay. It's what, $100? It's
$25 per bed annually that they pay to rent a spot for that.
Okay.
so $25 per bed annually for someone to actually have a bed or a plot at the garden. And that goes back to the city, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it goes back. That's funds we get.
And how many, do you know what?
There's about 60 plots.
Okay.
And I believe we get in like $1,500-$1,600 a year in revenue.
Does the city take on any liability from going onto private property and doing any kind of work?
I'd have to get the agreement out, but I'd say that.
Hold harmless?
Yes, sir. Any legalities were ironed out in that agreement, and I'd have to get that agreement to look at the details of that.
Okay. Is that something that you might be able to send to the council sometime this week?
Yes, sir.
I think those are all the questions that I have now. I'll defer to my other colleagues if they have any.
Thank you. Councilman Reed.
The only thing I wanted to reiterate is it's a removal of sponsorship, not closing down the garden. I think some folks fear that we're looking to remove the community garden, and that is not the case.
Correct.
I would echo what Councilman Reed said. I mean, it's on private property. It's not, we're just helping out. Earlier this year, we talked about several areas that the city was mowing that were on private property, that we stopped doing that. I like the idea of a community garden, but at the same time, I have a problem or understanding exactly when it's not open to everybody in the city.
It is.
Then we're-
It is.
I think it is available, yeah.
It is open.
Okay, there's only 60 slots, right?
But everybody's welcome to come there.
I understand that. They didn't like that question, did they? Anyway, I'll go on to Roger. I may come back.
I just want to also concur with Councilman Reed. I like the community garden. I want to keep the community garden. But as council representatives, I think it's important to us to understand the money that the city is spending towards the community garden. So I'm in favor of keeping the community garden, much like how I have the other items that were presented at the last council meeting. So I just want to make sure that that's very clear. So yeah, that's really kind of the only other comment that I had, and most of my questions were answered by Councilman Omar's questions. So.
Very good, thank you. Next citizen speaker will be Barbara Leedy. She had to leave. Samantha Hall.
My name is Samantha Hall, and I live at 4415 Mill Creek in 75244. I'm in my third year as a gardener at the garden. I've grown from 1 to 3 beds now. I've invested countless hours of volunteer time at the garden doing community work that benefits the garden, other gardeners, as well as MetroCrest. Word of mouth around the garden over the last week or so has been that the city is getting ready to shut down over budget. Mr. Jackson stated consistently in email responses that it's not a budget issue, but liability, as the city doesn't own the land. Mayor Lynn's office, on the other hand, state that the question is regarding staffing budgets for the garden, not eliminating the garden. Then there's a response from Mr. Neal stating that the issue is simply a question of the garden's annual cost of $33,000. So I'm not satisfied with any of this or the fact that there's no communication between garden management and the gardeners. So I'm going to assume it's completely about money. I had a career in management of people and budgets. I'm of the opinion that there are questions on budgeting for the garden because of a lack of understanding of the needs of the garden. I'd invite all of you, please, to come to the garden. Every Saturday and Wednesday morning, we do harvest, and there's 10 of us that are dedicated to doing that for MetroCrest. Thank God for Barbara Leedy. It's a shame y'all didn't get to hear her speak. She stepped into assistant leadership to be a conduit between us and Parks and Rec. She doesn't even have a bed there, and she's logged more hours than most of the gardeners with plots. The gardeners do not have representation in budget assistance with Parks and Rec. We have gardeners who have offered to research and apply for grants. Everyone agrees that the fees should be higher than $25 a bed. Many have agreed to bring our own supplies. Most of us bring our own seeds, fertilizers, things like that, if it's really a budget issue. We just need the water. There are constant leaks. There was vandalism in the past. When we report leaks, pooling of water, it takes multiple calls for anything to be addressed. The water costs a lot of money. Let us be part of the solution. Please don't remove extra funding from the garden. I think you guys are under the impression that there's a lot more man hours from Parks and Rec than there are. There's really nothing to mow. We're doing all the weeding. We're having to put beds to sleep that aren't being tended to. That used to be done by Parks and Rec. We're weeding walkways. That used to be done by Parks and Rec. There are so many things that aren't being done. So whether you're told they're done or not, I invite you, come to the garden, come speak with Barbara Leedy, and please don't remove funding until you have an understanding of how it's funded. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Susie Brown.
Hello, my name is Susie Brown. I live at 3405 Highland Meadow Drive, Farmers Branch 75234. I started working at the garden last winter, and I can tell you it's an amazing place. It's an amazing place for community. It's my understanding that we work in conjunction with the Metro Crest services, and we provided over 4,000 pounds of food last year to them to help the needy and the elderly. My daughter is not present today. She's with her father in Connecticut, but she is watching somewhere on her laptop, and she asked me if I'd read this letter from her. She is 16 years old, and she attends R.L. Turner High School. She says, "To the Farmers Branch City Council, it has recently come to my attention that the beloved Farmers Branch Community Garden is possibly going to be shut down. As a lifelong resident of Farmers Branch, as well as a member of the Branch Church who started Metro Crest, this does not appear to be the best step for our community. The Farmers Branch Community Garden has helped feed disadvantaged people since 2008, and just last year gave away more than 4,000 pounds of food. This isn't your average canned food. This is legitimate pesticide and chemical-free food that citizens took time out of their lives to provide. Great food is not the only benefit. A community garden is an amazing third space. I didn't know what a third space was, but she put, it's a social setting outside of work, school, and home for anyone of any age to have a nice chat while they grow watermelon. As a young teenage girl, I feel like this is crucial to my social development as well as anyone else. A vibrant social scene is what completes Farmers Branch. So please consider my words for a moment and rethink closing this wonderful garden and community down." Signed, Mary Jane Emma McDearman. And also, there is the German school next door, and there's a lovely teacher that comes out there with much younger children. And I think it's really important to show and learn the next generation, teach the next generation how to grow your own organic food. We're being failed by the FDA. Our stores, our big box stores, I've done a lot of research on the quality of our food in stores right now, and it's absolutely disgusting. We're being poisoned in certain foods, the processed foods. There's just a lot of things in the food that is not acceptable. So I'm there teaching my daughter how to grow her own food so that it will, it trickles down into healthcare. In the future, we're going to have all these people with health problems. And, I think it's important to teach them how to grow their own food as well as for us. So I do hope, and we invite all of you to come out and see what we do.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is David Downs. Gary Springer.
Hello, Council and Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm Gary Springer, and I live at 13834 New Bark Circle on the west side of the city. I am presently not a participant at the community garden, other than I do go up there because I have community there. And isn't that really what we're about, is having community and different ways to form community. This garden is important, and I'm speaking for a lot of different gardeners who have spoken to me personally about their passion. Isn't our logo still, we're a city in a park? You talk to someone from Dallas, and the number one thing they'll say is when they drive into Farmers Branch, they see a difference in terms of our parks and what we do on the side of the road, which I don't see as much of. But what I do see up here, that there are 9 priorities. There are 9 things that are being spoken to, and 3 of them affect our parks, our gardens, and our plans for the future. Now, the Rose Garden made it out this time, but I don't think it will the next time. It's the one thing that got marked out, but the community garden is there, and the budget for the, I forget what it says there, but reduce the Parks Master Plan, $400,000. What I see us doing is we are moving away from our mission and our identity as being a city and a park. And we're doing a lot of other things that I think are important and I certainly support. But is that the direction we want to go? Talk to people outside of Farmers Branch and say, what do you think is unique about Farmers Branch? And let me tell you, they're going to talk about the Rose Garden. They're going to talk about, yeah, I noticed when I drive across 635 and go up Marsh Lane, I get a whole different feel. So we do not want to move away from being a city in the park. It is important. It is part of our identity, but you're slicing away 3 items there. The Rose Garden is not being maintained. Someone lacks passion. Someone there lacks the passion to make that happen. It's a $260,000 budget. So we need to really look at that. Who is taking care of that garden, and is that plan sustainable? And do we need to make some changes there? So I had a lot more written out here, but I'm not going to go into that. I think we've got to communicate with our gardeners better. There's a huge gardening community here in Farmers Branch. But the community garden does so much education, socialization. Like I said, builds community. The school next door has a plot there. You've got young kids out there and you're teaching them how to
Thank
garden.
you.
So thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you. Next up is Katie Fairbank.
I'm Katie Fairbank at 3341 Chaparral Drive, Farmers Branch. I was an original plot owner when we first started the garden, stepped out because I had twins and didn't have any time to be there, but I still took them there. We still walked through to see all the things that everybody grew, so everyone could, my children would know what it was like to have that, because you don't get that at a suburb, except for someplace like the community garden. I stepped in about not that long ago, just in the last year, because my kids started driving, and so now there's time. So I just would like you all to think about when you're looking at line items here and you're adding $64,000 to contract to an outside company to mow medians in a development, and you're taking away $33,000 from a community garden, which is open to anybody who wants to come, and anybody who wants to participate and anybody who wants to walk through it. I'd like you to consider those two things juxtaposed against one another, because it's not a good look for Farmers Branch, which is, like you mentioned, supposed to be a city and a park. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the folks that I had signed up to speak to this item this evening. So I would close the public comment. I would like to say, though, just in general, as we continue to work through this and make sometimes really hard decisions, in my mind, it's not about, I'm not here to work for 3 cents. I'm here to work for what's right for our residents and what they want. 3 cents would be great. 10 cents would have been great. Not doable. Would have been great, though. 2.6 cents, still pretty good. 2.5 cents, still pretty good. 2 cents, still good in my mind, because we did that last year. And I think anytime we can take some steps to lower our tax rate, that's always a good thing, especially when property values are skyrocketing the way they are. But we also have to be mindful, and this is the council's decision. I don't vote, but what is right and where do we draw the line, and are we going to nickel and dime the city to a bad look? So I just put that out there, so as these discussions continue, that maybe you all will consider, again, it doesn't have to be 3 cents. Be something less, which is still good, and at the same time, maybe save some of these things that we're talking about, include the HR position that was discussed earlier. But I'll leave that I'll leave it at that and just open up the floor for general discussion regarding the budget and any questions for Tammy. Councilman Roman?
So I think as we're talking about the community garden, one thing that I heard is I think somebody said that it was really important to maintain the water, and I think that's something that I think can easily be done. I think it was within the $17,000 cost. I don't see there being an issue with doing that. And again, we're certainly not closing anything down, but I think I'd be in support of continuing the water and making sure that, we cover the fee. I mean, I'm sure with the $1,600 that we're paying, even if it doesn't cover the entire amount, I think that would be, a good in-between or compromise there, especially if there's not really a significant difference that people are noticing from labor or staff being there, then I don't think it would be missed. But I think what I heard was the important piece was the water. So I want to make sure that we can continue that. And then the other thing was, I think, Tammy, you were looking for direction on the HR position. My opinion has not changed there. So I'm fine with not moving forward with adding that position to the budget. I did have a question about, I just want to understand the differences between slide number 10 and slide number 11 as it relates to the second bullet point. Can you explain to me what the difference was in the original proposed journey to 3 cents and then the change for after the last meeting?
As far as the 8 events that were reduced?
The second bullet point that says reduce hours, like what was the difference in hours? Like I know what the dollar amount was, but what was originally presented as the reduction and then what was actually, I see what was actually done or is what's in the budget now for us to do, but what was originally presented? That's what I'd like to know.
And I'm going to bring up our
Yeah.
experts on that.
I could get those exact numbers for you, but I know we had a lot larger reduction in those first numbers that we gave to you. And what we look from internal discussions, we were trying to look at possibly a 10% reduction. And so this is the numbers we brought back to you, and this is all approximate to about a 10% reduction in the total number of hours. The numbers we brought to you and into June were we were just kind of trying to get an idea of what we could do in regards to like aquatics. We were really reducing more than it was some large reductions. So what we've got here is something that we also looked internally in regards to usage and really looked at those numbers and saw that we can reduce these numbers and have very minimal impact. And it's really going to look to efficiency and also maintain the safety we have at all our facilities as well. So, and as you can see, and we only looked at, from aquatics, only the indoor, because that's open 82 hours a week. It's a large number of hours, so we definitely have room to make some efficiencies there. And then it was only a 6-hour reduction for the rec and 7 hours for the branch connection. Primarily, we're looking at Sunday time periods because we have very low attendance on those Sundays. So, like I said, we're looking at areas that has very minimal impact, but we could save some money at.
Okay, and I think what would be helpful for me is that second part of the slide where it says Aquatics Recreation Center and the branch connection, that exact same structure, but compared to what was originally presented so that I can understand what the difference was.
Okay.
And then the second thing that I wanted to understand is the difference is compared, same 2 slides, but and I see we have the outcome here for the events, but I wanted to see what was originally presented as the 8 that were going to be reduced. So I guess basically the same slide, but here's what was originally in the journey that was presented, and then here's where we are right now as that's going to be considered to be included in the budget. I just want to make sure I'm really clear on exactly what the change was.
Okay.
And let me see if I have any other questions. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
As a follow-up to Councilman Roman's point there on the journey, I see it says in the first slide, historical park with an asterisk. Is that slide 10? And it's not listed on the next slide. What is that differential?
Right. Well, historical park, when we gave you those first numbers, the funding for that comes out of the hot fund, the hotel motel fund. So when we did the current slide, that we took that out because this is all, we need to restrict it to general fund.
Oh, okay. All right. Just curious. Yeah, going back, I stay with my position in regards to that HR position. I would like to see it added. I think that the benefit that it provides, not only for enhancing city staff, but also from a protection against potential issues down the road. Litigious, unfortunately, we've turned into a very litigious society. And I think it provides that protection against that, as well as the updating of the policies and, again, the training as we folks progress through their careers here. Having that managerial training, I think, will be crucial and critical. I concur with Councilman Roman in regards to providing the water for the community garden. Again, it seems, based on commentary, that there doesn't seem, the impression I got was that they didn't see much impact of the staff that was working there. Correct me if I'm wrong. So at least providing the water would be beneficial. Someone had mentioned, I think, did someone mention that they thought 25 was a low value for the beds?
I think one of the residents did, yeah.
Yeah, so that might be something to consider as well, possibly adjusting that. And again, there is absolutely no intention of closing the community garden. We've witnessed here today with the folks that chose to come up to speak, that we as a community get a lot of benefit from it, as well as Metro Crest Services and the food that gets donated to them. And that's something that we might want to consider, or the community folks might want to consider, is some sort of program with Metro Crest Services where they can, folks that are utilizing their services maybe come out and volunteer time at the garden as well. So just something to think about. And that's all she wrote. That's all I have. Thank you.
Regarding the garden, I'm for the city providing the water for sure, and none of us wanted to close it down, just for the record. I'm not for the HR position. And as far as the trash fee, are we having a separate discussion on that, or can I jump in on the trash fee?
Please jump in.
The problem with it is that we're giving this tax break, 2 or 3 cents right now, but to pay for that tax break, we're going to have a new fee. And I understand the logic of ramping it up over years and years, but I'm not sure I'm for that, so.
So yeah, I'm in agreement also on the community garden regarding, I think we should at least pay for the water and the irrigation if that is of concern to the residents. From what I'm hearing, the city is providing little in the way of mulch or seeds or these other types of things that sounds as though they had mentioned that in some cases they bring their own. So they don't provide, okay. So maybe it's the staffing, but I still want to hold out on my decision on this, but at the very least, we should be paying for the water, because personally, I would like to go out there and visit them on a Saturday and get some more closer feedback, but as a minimum, I think the water is at least most appropriate. Another item on this page I'd like to have a discussion briefly about is the removal of the fountain at Webb Chapel in Valley View. I've come to learn a little bit of history about that location, and I'm a little surprised it hasn't been brought up heretofore, but it's my understanding that that fountain in that particular area has a dedication to Brother Eddie, who has been related to the Branch Connection Church across the way. I don't attend that church, but I think those church members might be a little concerned by removing the fountain because it is dedicated to Brother Eddie, and I'd like to see that fountain remain as it is. And maybe we can give it some more attention during the winter months to shut off the water so it doesn't freeze and cause any damage to the pipe. So just the comments there. I'm not sure how the council might feel about that, but I'd like us to keep the fountain there at Webb Chapel in Valley View. As regards to the HR position, my position hasn't changed there, so that remains the same.
Which is?
I'm against that particular position. And then one of the other things was the Woven Clinic, as I understand it. Before we made a hard decision on the Woven Clinic cut in fees, they were going to give us a presentation. I believe they're scheduled to come and do that, so I would like to hold off on that until we can hear some more feedback from the Woven Clinic before we cut their items from the budget. I do think they provide a great value to the residents, so I want to hear a little bit more about that. So. And then finally, just to quickly follow up on Councilman Baird made a comment. I had understood from our last meeting that we were going to have a conversation about trash and trash fees again. Is that not, was I misunderstanding that, or?
It's intended for here. If there's any additional information, it's open to the council. We're just looking.
Yeah, I also would agree that proposing a tax rate and then putting a fee on the resident is kind of, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So just was hoping we could have some more discussion, but and then sort of the last thing I just want to sort of clarify once again and reiterate what I had mentioned at the last meeting, and that was I did not ask for, nor did I advocate for closing of any facilities or amenities to which the residents enjoy. I know there may be people here saying that is not my position, but that is my position. It always has been a strong desire not to close such facilities. So just to be clear, I'm not in favor of closing the library or the Branch Connection or the rec center or the swimming pool or similar facilities that the residents use. So I just feel the need, I have to say that again, because some folks here in the room are spreading information that is not correct. So that's all I'm going to add.
Thank you. So we've now had 3 presentations by HR, and I really feel compelled to ask. You don't have to answer tonight, but I'm going to ask again at the next council meeting for a justification as to why you don't think we need this HR position, because I thought it was very well explained this evening. So I think it's needed for our city. And again, I'm not here to pinch pennies, but I am here to manage big dollars. And I think this is very important. So I intend to bring that up again on the 16th. I'm sure Councilman Jackson will also. And then, as I've said numerous times, on the trash fee, just so it's clear, because that was passed last September. Some of you were on council last September. we have a liability facing the city that's estimated to be about $40 million in today's dollars. And for those who don't understand, the landfill that we own has a finite lifespan. That lifespan has been estimated to be about 22 to 24 years left. And what happens when it's full is that the day that we close that landfill, we have to have $40 million sitting in the bank in an escrow account, a closure fund that will manage or pay for the management of that landfill for the next 30 years after it's closed. This is something that has been, I can't tell you how important it's been to me since I was first elected to city council. So 8 years ago, I brought up just putting $1 a month on everybody's water bill to help accelerate the collection of funds for this closure account. And of course, as is typical, council at the time said, oh, we don't need to mess with that. That's 25 years down the road. We don't need to mess with that. Somebody else's problem. Guys, I'm here to tell you, it's our problem, and we would not be good stewards of the city if we didn't support doing this. Because again, not only do we have to have this money sitting in an account when the landfill closes, but we will also be charging residents for trash collection service. And that will probably cost somewhere between $25 and maybe $35 a month. The thought when this $5 fee was implemented was that, and it's $5 for those under 65, $250 a month for seniors, was that we're collecting money, we're accelerating the collection of money, and we're also gearing or training our residents to realize that, yes, there's a cost to residential trash service, and they're having to pay for it. That fee would be increased each 5 years. So $5 for 5 years, then it would double to 10. And then 5 more years, which would be 15 years, then it would go to $15. And then after 20 years, it'd be at $20 a month. And all in the hopes of, one, collecting additional funds to help manage the closure of landfill, but two, also conditioning residents that we actually do have to pay for residential trash collection service. And I think to not face that reality, whether you call it additional fee, whether you call it tax, I don't care what you call it, we have to pay for it. It's the reality of the situation. But to not face that and not plan accordingly for it today is not being a good steward of our city. We're not good financial planners if we're not looking at that and doing that. So I'm going to keep harping on this until I find the right argument to convince all y'all that this is the right thing to do, because I believe it's that important. So as I sit here today, you got 2 more years of hearing me say it. I hope that you'll take it to heart today so we're not falling behind any further. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. This is really serious stuff. Yes.
Well, I like to think of myself as a great financial planner. I actually graduated from the top programs, and in the top of my program, actually. I agree with the closure fee. I forgot to mention that, so I wrote it down in my little list. I think it's important that the way we communicate this fee is very, very transparent, because I think it's important to delineate what the effective tax rate reduction is versus what the tax rate reduction is incorporating the revenue that's being generated from this additional fee. I think that needs to be very, very clear, because I do not want residents to make the suggestion or the argument that we are saying, hey, we cut your taxes by X amount, but actually we didn't, because we came back and we charged you a fee in another way. And that's how we ended up doing it. So at the end of the day, it was a moot point. So I think it's important that we separate that out in the way that we communicate with people. So that's an important delineation when we do marketing material, when we do PowerPoints or any presentations, newsletters. That's a really important delineation. And then I agree with you. I was not aware that the fountain was dedicated to Brother Eddie. So I think it's important, given that he was a staple in the community, to preserve that. And maybe there are ways that we can look at trying to maybe figure out how we can be proactive at making sure that we're not constantly making repairs. If not, then we know what the cost is. Let's see. Councilmember Neal, I understood the same thing. I thought we were going to be having a presentation. I thought that Shane was going to be coming back to make the presentation. I know that we have two new council members who were not here when we had the initial presentation about what the exponential cost is going to be for the land closure, and then how we were going to take proactive steps to get there. So I think that's the presentation he was referring to, which I think would be helpful also for everybody to just listen to, and even for the residents who may have not been closely watching and studying this material as we all have to, because we're the decision makers. And then the other thing is that I just ask that, Mayor, that you respect the council's decision on the HR position. I recognize fully that you are fully within your rights to bring up and add whatever item you would like to bring up. But I just ask that you respect our decision that we've made here collectively now twice, in the last meeting as well as in this meeting, that the HR position is not one that we would like to be added into the budget. So I just ask that you respect it. It's just an ask. You don't have to do it. You're certainly within your rights to do what you'd like to do, but I just thought I'd ask. And that's it for me.
Thank you. I would just like to understand logic and reasoning behind not doing this. That's it. It's real easy to sit here and say no, just like planning and zoning. They can say no. We don't want to approve a project, and they don't have to give an answer or a reason why. Well, that doesn't help the developer to know what he needs to do to change his project in order to become acceptable. So I'm just failing to see what's missing in the presentation. So if people want to share that with me individually or whatever, that's fine.
I just haven't been convinced.
Okay.
I mean, that's
Fair enough.
it.
I agree with Councilman Roman in regards to the trash fee. I see it as something that's definitely needed, or at least obtaining those funds and putting it into the closure and post-closure fund. However, having it, if there is a way to have it separate from the conversation in regards to tax rate reduction, because at $486,000, that's approximately half a cent, I would say. Now, the impact per household, if you look at someone whose property is $350,000 versus someone whose property is $1 million, that tax cut provides a greater benefit to that person whose home is $1 million versus $350,000. However, they're both going to pay a $5 per month fee. I'm just throwing that out from an equity standpoint. So I don't know if there's a way to, incorporate it into, instead of a fee per household, but include it in the in the tax calculation, does that make sense? And maybe take those, take the proceed, so reduce the reduction by 0.5 cent. Take whatever those proceeds would be, apply that to the closure, post-closure. So it's more of an equitable position in regards to households.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Doesn't matter, either one doesn't make any difference to me.
Right.
I think you're saying figure out what the revenue target is that we're trying to target this year, and then do the backwards math to figure out what the rate.
Right. So I'm just basing it on the 486, which again is like half a cent.
Yeah.
So that way it's spread more equitably against across the residents by property value
No.
versus it being a flat tax.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
And I still support the HR position.
okay.
I was going to say exactly what David said about if you have a higher value house, you will see a bigger benefit from the tax cut, but everybody is paying the same trash fee. But I agree with you, we've got to fund the closure. I'm not against that. We also have a bunch of pipes to pay for. Got to pay for that. But it does seem a little odd, especially with the inequity of, if you have, yeah, you stole my thunder. I'm just going to repeat what you said. So I agree with you. And then I did have one other thing. Ben was wondering if we can get some information on whether there's any overlap and savings that could be budget savings from doing any consolidation of the media specialist in the communication department, because they seem like they do some similar things, and I'm wondering if there's any savings to be had from that. So
We can definitely do that analysis and get some numbers back for council.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify.
Roger,
Oh, sorry.
I do have.
go ahead.
I just want to thank the three councilmen for supporting the comments that I made during the last meeting regarding this land closure fee. My concern was the separation between the tax rate and a fee. That's all I was saying. I was not against the fee. I wanted it separated, much as they just explained. Maybe I didn't articulate that clearly, but I want to thank them for clarifying that a little bit. I do recognize we do have to pay for a closure fee, but I do have a question or two of the city regarding our landfill. Can you tell me what other cities are using our landfill, or how many other cities?
Shane, you appeared mysteriously quickly. That's a perfect timing.
So from residential's perspective, so Shane Davis, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Residential, yeah.
Just looking at residential, because commercial, I couldn't tell you. It could
Yeah,
be
just
anywhere across the
residential,
place.
as it relates to this landfill we're going to be charging our residents.
So it's primarily going to be the ones that are serviced by Republic Services. To my knowledge, it's the Colony. I think Capel is on that list now. Highland Village was on there, but I don't remember if they've recently gone out for a renegotiation. Carrollton would be another one. Those are the ones I know off the top of my head that were users of ours from residential perspective. Louisville's in that boat now. Sorry, Louisville now because DFW landfill is closed. That was a recent addition.
Okay, so there's roughly 4 or 5 cities, maybe a 6th if Highland Park renegotiates. My follow-on question to that is, what contribution to the landfill closure fee are we asking them to provide? And why is it that Farmers Branch is the sole residents bearing that burden? Can we not ask the other citizens to pony up a fair share to that closure fee?
No. They negotiate rates.
I'm sorry, what was that?
No.
Okay.
Because we don't negotiate the rates with the other cities. Republic, any hauling company can come to our landfill. Republic is the main residential one that comes to our site. CWD typically goes to other ones, Dallas or Denton. But a city, let's say we didn't have a landfill. We would put out an RFP for garbage collection. We wouldn't necessarily specify what landfill they're going to go to. Their job, if you're going to give us the best rate, you're going to figure out which landfill you can get in the cheapest at. And so that's how I'm going to negotiate the rate with the city. So, because private companies any city can use any private company. That's why we don't have that ability to impose that on another city.
It just seems a little unfair to me that our residents have to carry that burden while other cities are utilizing our facility. So that's all.
And I would say, Ben, just I'm gonna add a caveat that typically the tipping fee kind of incorporates part of that into it, but that's set by Republic as well. And they've been steadily inching that up. So I'll let you, Ben, say what you're
No, I was going to say, no, it's a great point, but part of it is the trash fee not existing at all, whereas any other city around us, they're paying $20 to $30 per month for service, and they don't have the same level of service we do, like the twice a week. We have city staff that do brush and bulk, so with the recent storms, other cities are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars.
But that's not going towards closure.
No, but that's the benefit, though, of the landfill, because it subsidizes that side of the equation. And so because it's not put in an enterprise fund, it's a general fund function. The general fund is where we have to figure out how to pay for the closure, post-closure, and also prepare the city for the eventuality that no matter what, a trash fee is coming. And by the time it arrives in 20 to 22 years, it's most likely going to be closer to $30, depending on the service levels council and the residents decide to go with. There's other things we can do. We previously talked about a franchise agreement with the haulers. There's little things we can do to hedge against it, but eventually the trash fee comes on the books in its full form. The landfill revenues have been offsetting all of these solid waste operations of the city above and beyond and completely. And that's one of the benefits of living here, but eventually that revenue source that pays for that disappears. And so it's that eventuality of saving for it. We could argue, could we have been saving better in the past? We could always say that. But right now it's making sure as we move forward with it, we're saving appropriately. So 20, 22 years from now, future councils, future residents don't get hit with a really tough decision. They're prepared for that gentle ascent into having trash fees if it would be.
No, I understand. I just want to keep it separate as these other councilmen represent. I understand we got to pay for this. We're going to have to do it. So
And we can absolutely show the marketing on that one. So on the slides, Shane, would you take us back to slide 11?
It's sort of like if you look at the effective tax rate, so to speak. You know, let's say, keep the numbers simple. Let's say 3 cents, but if you figure in the landfill or the
yeah, it could be 3
fee,
and 4.
then maybe it's only 2.6 or 2.4 cents.
By taking it out, you mean?
Yeah.
By taking it out.
And so your effective is really a lower amount.
I hear you.
I'm fine with making that. I have no objection to that. You know, we need to let people know what's going on, but we need to do both. We need to communicate it properly, and we need to start doing it. That's it.
And so for the eventual rate, you notice a new number appeared on the chart. We're trying to see what does it look like if we can get to 4 cents. So we're squeezing every possible way we can. We're still waiting on revenues, and unfortunately, some are going down. But we can always show the tax rate may move, for example, 4 cents, but how you will feel it based on your home price may be for a senior 3 cents or a homesteaded house 2.5 cents, depending on which one you have. And that would be the true tax feeling. So even though the tax rate goes down by hypothetically 4 cents, the actual feeling with the trash fee would be that other amount, but it starts the processes working together, and we can communicate that clearly to the residents so they know, yes, there is a fee that's coming on the books potentially, but here's what your actual tax alignment would be, and we can run those numbers.
Again, I'm okay and understand the need for the fee. The only thing I'd like to ask Mayor is, would it be possible that we as a council put some contingencies around the utilization of that fund, such that it's not pilfered for some other aspect of the
Those
city,
funds
so
are
that it's
restricted
strictly
funds,
foreclosure?
correct?
Can we codify that in some ordinance or something in some way? So.
It's already been done.
It is a restricted fund. It is specifically used on landfill cost only.
Okay.
The only thing you'd see maybe is the flares that are on there, but those are part of closures as we close the cells. It's just maintenance and upkeep for the gas system.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay. Any other questions, comments? We're not marked for action.
No.
But-
Do we have a consensus on the Webb Chapel fountain? I have Councilmember Neal and Omar. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll go to keep it also.
Okay.
Yeah, Tammy, I wasn't aware of that. And so hearing that is certainly news, and I think we owe it
Yeah, in fact, there's a plaque there dedicated to him.
Well, I haven't seen
Yeah,
that.
it's there.
Okay, I just drive by it all the
Yeah, I
time.
went by and.
Love the beauty of it.
I paid a
Haven't really
visit.
said
You'll
that.
probably see me on the cameras because I found the cameras over there too. So.
I'll go check it out as well and find out
Okay.
if, because you could also see if maybe that's something the church would want to take over as well. So those things we'll bring options to you all,
Sure.
because I always like to
Sure.
put things in the proper alignment, if it's absolutely respecting the legacy and importance to the city, but also where does that responsibility go? And we can always,
Or maybe does a piece of art provide something better? I don't know. But I
Maybe
think
the
we can
church would
talk
like
about it.
something else altogether. I don't know. But
Yeah,
if we're going
yeah.
to have that relationship, I don't know. But.
So, okay.
And then we'll wait until July 16th when Woven Clinic comes with their presentation. And trash fee will communicate. We have the chart where we use different values of homes to show what a 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent, what that would provide in annual savings. We were using in the last specially called meeting, we used a $500,000 value home, and it was about $40 a year for 1 penny for a homestead exemption, and then it was $30 a year for our senior exemption. So we can kind of differentiate with that $5 and the $250 for the senior, where they would kind of fit in on their savings. If we want to do it that way, we can come up with some ideas that we pass to you and how we communicate the difference. Okay?
Thank you.
I think I've got all my answers.
Tammy will also bring back Shane's presentation on the
Yes.
landfill, bring the fee so y'all can see that historic presentation and make sure y'all are aware of the content of that presentation that the previous council saw.
Yes, and then a consensus on continuing to pay the cost for water for the community garden. And possible increase.
At
in the
least,
fee for
at least the
plot.
water.
The water.
I want to go visit them and spend some time out there.
Okay.
Tammy, given where we are right now in the calculations, let's take a step back. Given where we were when we walked into the room today, what
We've added back, so.
price reduction were we,
So
rate
we
reduction
were-
were we looking at?
Now, we did take out the trash fee at the specially called meeting, and that put us down to, I think, 2.8 cents. With that put back in, it got us to the 3 cents, but we're probably going to go hover very closely at that. Again, once we have those certified values, I can give you a more definitive
Okay.
answer.
Will you be able to give us a ballpark on the tote board next week?
Unfortunately not.
No,
So
not on that, but just on where we are
where
for
we
the ad.
are, yes.
Okay.
So we'll
Yeah,
gather and go over all the decisions that were made tonight, and again, kind of put back into the budget and see where we're at. Because we have to present a balanced budget, so
yeah,
that's where we'll go. Okay,
okay.
thank you so much.
Council, anybody have anything else? I think it was a very good, productive meeting this evening. I want to thank you for your time. Residents, thank you all for coming this evening, and we will adjourn at 7:38.
Excellent.